I think what's really powerful about crypto is its ability to like mobilize a massive amount of resources, right? Like if you look at just the number of GPUs that were in the proof of work days of Ethereum set up to mine Ethereum, it's like 50 times as much compute power as what was used to train ChatGPT, right? So you have like a huge amount of resources, and AI model required huge amount of resources to be trained, right? It can cost like $10 million to train a model.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me is Anna Kazlauskas, who's the co-founder and CEO of Vana. Anna, great to have you on.
Yeah, great to be here.
Anna, you're doing some great things and very interesting things at Vana with the convergence of AI and blockchain. And I'm really excited to speak with you because I've been noodling and thinking a lot about these things and data and how you can monetize your data and own your data in the Web3 world and tokenized world we're headed to. So lots of questions, but let's start with your background. Where you from and where'd you grow up?
Yeah. So I was born in Montreal. Lived there for the first 5 years, moved to Sweden, and then moved to Minnesota. So mostly grew up there. Half Lithuanian, hence the last name, half Filipino. And then I ended up moving to Boston for school at MIT. And then, left school, moved to San Francisco, and have pretty much been here since.
And before you started Vana, what was your professional background? I noticed you were at some crypto company, Cello, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So I got into crypto through like, I guess, an interest in traditional currency. So I had worked at the Fed in high school. I actually had a picture of Janet Yellen, chair of the Fed, in my
Wow.
high school bedroom, which is like totally weird. Like, who does that, right? And then got to MIT and learned about these decentralized currencies. This was back in 2015. And then it was like the five-person MIT Bitcoin Club. I started mining Ethereum from my dorm room and just got really fascinated in kind of the world of decentralization. And I also sort of came across the world of AI through MIT as well. I was doing some research at CSAIL. Basically, this was when the attention is all you need paper, which is kind of the foundations of ChatGPT, had come out, but people hadn't figured out how to use it to generate new text. They had just figured out how to use it to kind of model some text. And so I used some of that to automate my job sorting documents at the World Bank, and then ended up leaving school, going through Y Combinator, discovering this world of like Silicon Valley. My life's purpose is not to sort the world's documents. And so I actually ended up joining Cello as an early engineer there, focused on kind of building a mobile first cryptocurrency and kind of having this stable store of value that you can use from any mobile phone around the world.
Mm. Now, Anna, you're at the forefront of two major emerging tech sectors, AI, blockchain, and crypto. What do you love the best, or do you love them both equally?
Yeah, I would say ideologically crypto, like, and I think because with crypto, it's a very foundational shift in terms of how power structures in the world could work. And it is a sort, like I would say most crypto outcomes, it's the thing where if it works, it really, really works in this massive way, like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And I think that that is just a really interesting problem space to be in. And it feels like the frontier, right? Of like, this is really still the very beginnings of the crypto kind of decentralized industry. Um, But I guess there's some really cool math with AI. So like maybe, yeah, there's like definitely some fun math with AI. And yeah, I mean, today a lot of the AI work is like training AI models.
Hmm.
It's almost like DevOps type stuff. It depends. So yeah, hard choice. I think that you can apply a lot of the principles of crypto, which are kind of like censorship resistance, true like self-sovereignty towards AI, both in kind of an open source AI context and a decentralized AI context. And yeah, then that's a lot of fun. So sort of depends. If I had to choose one, um, yeah, crypto's ideology and like AI's core technology. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like a little bit of both. So.
For sure. So what do you think about the, I guess what you would call symbiotic relationship with crypto, excuse me, blockchain and AI? Because AI we're seeing is being used to enhance certain blockchain attributes and crypto attributes, while blockchain is being used to police AI a bit with deep fakes and things like that. And there's different technologies being built. So do you see them working together as the future, as things progress?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to break it down, right? You sort of have like AI for crypto. So that means like how do you make models available on chain, use them for trading and stuff like that. And then you have crypto for AI, where you're using the tools of blockchain and for crypto to really advance AI progress. And that's where Vana sits. And so that's where I spend most of my time kind of thinking about the intersection. I think what's really powerful about crypto is its ability to like mobilize a massive amount of resources, right? Like if you look at just the number of GPUs that were in the proof of work days of Ethereum set up to mine Ethereum, it's like 50 times as much compute power as what was used to train ChatGPT, right? So you have like a huge amount of resources, and AI models require a huge amount of resources to be trained, right? It can cost like $10 million to train a model. And that's just thinking about the compute, like the GPU cost, which that has been talked about a lot, and not even yet thinking about the data cost. So I think that kind of using crypto incentives to allow for very large scale projects to be funded in more kind of community oriented, open source type ways is like what's most interesting to me. And what I would say too is that's distinct from just sort of like the naive approach is basically, okay, let's put AI on the blockchain, right? But I think it's important to take a step back and be like, why do we even have a blockchain? Okay, it's because we value like censorship resistance, like true self-sovereignty. And then how do we create a system that uses some of that distributed consensus that's worked really well in blockchains, but applies it towards this AI native world that we're moving towards over the next 5 to 10 years.
Hmm. So when did the idea come about to start Vana, and what's your mission?
Yeah. So Vana was first started actually back at MIT as like a research project super early on. This is like 2018 of like basically what I had seen is the only thing that matters for AI models in the long run is data. Like data is really the new oil. It is just this immensely valuable thing. And so the question I was asking, along with my co-founder who I met, he was doing his graduate degree at Harvard when I was doing my undergrad at MIT. And so we had taken a class together at the MIT Media Lab. His question was like, how can you leverage the power of like many people rather than just having like centralized institutions training a single model to all collectively contribute? At the time, we were doing like data labeling where we would have people label data from their phone super early on and earn based on that. And then I started working on Vana full time a little over like 3.5 years ago. That was still quite early in the like crypto AI space. We in 2022 we got our patent for kind of non-custodial data, which was kind of a way for you to be able to manage your data in a similar way to how you can manage your funds with a crypto wallet. So you can use your MetaMask to manage your data that's on Vana. Um, and yeah, our mission is to kind of like shift the power of data and AI towards many people rather than just one centralized institution. The like economic framing I have of it is to ensure that users own their data and the value that it creates, but that's a little bit abstract. So it's really just about how do you make it so that things that get created from your personal data that you've created, you kind of are attributed to you and you earn from, and also allowing AI progress to be pushed forward through that.
Hmm. For years, I've been thinking a lot about this and data going on the blockchain and where I can lend it out to advertisers, or I could do whatever I want and monetize it. And it sounds like you guys are building that solution. And I think in the world we're headed towards, where with digital identity and updates to different advertising laws, GDPR and privacy and all these things, do you see that eventually all of us will have wallets? It'll have our digital identity, our data, and so forth on a smart contract, locked and whatever it may be, and then we choose who we want to give it to or lend it out to and so forth?
Exactly. Yeah. You're just pitching Vana right back. So there we go.
um, but let's talk a bit about the economics of that. So would it be like, let's say, Apple computer, right? I don't know. And I'm spitballing here because I don't fully understand all the concepts of this yet. Would it be I give them my data and they pay me a monthly fee or a one-time fee? Like how do you think that might work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that it's sort of been this shift as people have become aware of the immense value that AI creates, right? Like if you think sort of 5 years back, the value proposition of, hey, we're going to give you $20 for your data. It's honestly not that interesting. Like to some people, it might make sense, but like to the average person, it's just like not that interesting of like, why would I want that? Whereas if the value prop is like, hey, contribute your data in exchange for ownership in an AI model, right? Like own the part of the next ChatGPT. And it acts much more like equity, like a stake in an AI model rather than a one-time payment. I think that that is much more compelling for users from what we've seen at Vana. And I think that it also points towards like this economic shift that's happening where a huge amount of economic value is created through AI, right? Like ChatGPT or OpenAI, they hit $3.4 billion in revenue this summer, right? That's just an immense amount of money that's primarily coming from intelligence that is trained on everyone's knowledge, right? Everyone who's created data has created that knowledge, which has helped teach that AI. And our view is that if you have the right incentive system, you can build much better AI and also align incentives. So yeah, kind of moving towards like, okay, what does it look like tactically today? Like the Reddit Data DAO, which is one of the projects that's built on Vana, they aggregated like 140,000 users' data. They trained an AI model from that. It's really good at sounding like a snarky Redditor. I've heard some people joke it's sort of like the leading shit posting model, right? So like in terms of it's not yet beating ChatGPT, but like at some point there will be enough data across all these different data sources that it will. And every time that model is used, all of the users actually get paid out, right? And so you have kind of this nice flow where yeah, in the future, it's like every time someone's interacting with an AI model like ChatGPT or Claude, the people who have contributed towards teaching it the knowledge that it has are the ones that are rewarded. And so you have this really strong kind of data flywheel in place.
That's so fascinating because you mentioned about the shit posting and so forth. So it made me think of you have these niche AI models, so to speak, backed by communities. They have their own personality, their own take on things. That's so fascinating to me. So, is that the world we're headed to, where there's different AI? Am I articulating it well? Is in models or bots? I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, no, I think models or bots, however you want to say it, that's both of those are perfectly correct. I think that, yeah, the world we're headed towards, yeah, I think there's sort of this debate right now of like, what is truth, right? Because we're trying to all build a single AI model and be like, the AI model knows this and this is true. But that's a really hard question, right? Like, actually, we have not solved that as human beings aside from an AI context. Like, that is a massive debate that happened in the social media days. And now we're kind of having the same thing in the AI days. And our view is just having this healthy ecosystem. I think it aligns actually a lot with the open source work that Meta is doing, just putting AI models out there and allowing many people to sort of modify them, customize them, align them towards a particular set of preferences or views, depending on what they'd like, right? So you have this balanced, healthy ecosystem rather than one single massive AI model that is controlled by just one or two companies.
So Anna, give me some rope here. Let's say with the Thinking Crypto podcast, I have a community of people. Let's say it's a total is like over 200,000 people that follow, listen to me, right? Can I build an AI model to teach newbies about crypto, and my community sources that info to that model, and then people can pay to have that model teach them crypto? Would that be the economics or business models
Yeah,
of?
totally. Hmm.
Hmm, that is fascinating. I have to talk to you after this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And
so
I think the way to think about that is like, so think about what AI models can't do today, and then think about the knowledge that you uniquely have or your community uniquely has beyond what's included in AI models today. And that's really where the sort of like alpha is, right? Of like what information is contained in the data that most models don't have access to. So generally the internet you can publicly scrape. That means just like all the sites you can visit without logging into them. So that's sort of already in a lot of these AI models, but there's a huge amount of information that like and your community knows that not very many other people know, right? So having the ability for you to train an all-powerful AI model based on that unique knowledge, and have that truly belong to your community.
hmm. And I guess the like you said, aside from what's scraped on the web and what's already out there, the nuance of, hey, I'm from this part of the United States or this part of the world. I'm 30 something years old. I'm 20 something years old. Here's what my investment story and journey was. Here's how it impacted my life. That's something the AI can pull from it anywhere except someone sharing that story, right?
Totally, yeah. Hmm.
That's
And I
fascinating.
think too often the data that's really valuable is this like contextual data on a person, right? So it's like, hey, like here's maybe how I got into crypto, and then also here's kind of here are my demographics, here's my perspective on the world, kind of being able to share like both your tweets, but also your financial history, which could include like your trades, your credit card history, and maybe even your journal entries. And there's really no single tech company that has access to all of that, right? They might have access to a small slice of it, but if you want to get all of those different data sources across a given user, you really need to work with the user directly. And so that's kind of the power of using decentralization. We can actually leverage data regulation like GDPR, which you had mentioned, CCPA in California, to ensure that a user can get that data out of whichever platform they've kind of posted it, and then actually contribute it to these powerful AI models.
Mm. Now, let's go back to the Reddit Data DAO. I had a question. I guess first part is why DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organizations? And is that the only way to do this, where you can have the crowdsourcing and to have it in a decentralized way?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think like DAOs have a pretty mixed reputation in crypto, right? Like if we look over the past maybe 5 years of DAOs, I think there are a few breakout success stories, but as a whole, like it's actually very hard to get a decentralized group of people to govern something. And so it can be a challenge. What we've seen with data DAOs is that often you have a large number of people come in initially and connect their data, and then a smaller percent of them stay and help manage that data and sort of like decide, hey, this company wants to buy access to it, or this machine learning engineer wants to train an AI model on it. Should we grant them access? What are fair economics, et cetera? And so by default, all of that is decided by the DAO because it's very hard to price data, right? Like how should you decide so we've basically, we see the DAOs as making that decision ultimately. But in the future, there are ways too where you don't need to create a DAO and there can just be kind of stablecoin based payments for a particular data pool. This is a little bit technical, but it's kind of the distinction between what we call a data liquidity pool, so a DLP on Vana. Most of them are data DAOs, but they actually don't have to be a DAO if they don't want a token affiliated with their particular data set. So we have this slightly more general framing, which is a data liquidity pool, which is just about kind of building up that data liquidity, getting many people's data all pooled together, because your data is only valuable once you combine it with others, right? You can't train an AI model on just one person's data. You really want a lot of data.
Yeah.
And so that's a good question, and there is some nuance there.
So the Reddit data DAO, how are they monetizing that data? And what are they selling it for? And what's the
Yeah.
currency being used?
Yeah, yeah. So they created their own currency, which is used as a governance. It's basically the DAO kind of token that's used to govern the Reddit data set. And its primary purpose is governance, basically voting on, hey, should we let new people come in and contribute their data and reward them? And also, should we let someone access our data? So one of the folks they granted access to the data is actually like ex Google Brain machine learning engineer who trained an AI model, that like shit posting model that I had mentioned. So that it's in the phase of like research preview right now, and then they're rolling it out. And to interact with that, you'll have to actually sort of like hold a minimum amount of that Reddit dataset governance token. They're also sort of finalizing a data sale in the works right now. And so the way, I'm actually not sure exactly how they've structured those economics. It could be that they're having the data buyer burn the governance token, or it could be that they're distributing revenue to the governance token holder. So it could be either of those two, and it depends on what the DAO decided.
Couple questions, follow-up questions on that. Do you have to create your own token, or can you use an existing token or a stable coin, as you mentioned before?
Yeah.
Because if you get into the creation of a token, could you have securities issues, security laws issues, I should say?
Yeah, yeah. You can use a stable coin, you can use a pre-existing token, and so you can kind of collectivize however you'd like. And I'll mention too, the Reddit Data DAO actually only intended for their token to be used for kind of like governance and voting. And so that was their intention from the beginning. I think there was some trading activity that came up on it, but it's primarily used for voting. So I think in the long run, we'll see sort of some activities like that. And yeah, depending on kind of your risk profile and how you structure it, right? Each data DAO has their own preferences in terms of what they're looking for from a governance perspective, from a revenue distribution perspective. And so they can structure their own token. It's similar to like an ERC20 token, right? So you can kind of modify it however you'd like.
So are you primarily using ETH to build these DAOs, or are you using other blockchains as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we actually started as basically we were like, okay, let's start and let's deploy this to like ETH or an L2 and sort of see what happens. What we realized is that like a lot of the optimizations that people have made for primarily financial transactions don't work that well in a Vana context, which are data transactions, right? So on Vana, basically all the transactions are like permissioning out data or interacting with a data token or interacting with an AI model. And that's a very different set of constraints. You care a lot about low fees, you care a lot about pretty fast block times, and then you also have data regulation constraints. So actually, if we were to run our own kind of like sequencer as an L2, that would be regulated as a data processor. And so we realized like actually we need a standalone set of Vana nodes that are basically operating this kind of like data transaction network. And so, yeah, Vana is it is a layer one blockchain that's designed for private data. It's fully EVM compatible, and I see a world in the future where everything is kind of cross-chain, right? So you have all these different bridges, and it's really easy to kind of like be interoperable across different chains. But yeah, for data regulation reasons, we actually had to land on a standalone layer one for private data. And the tokenomics look pretty similar to Ethereum, where essentially there is kind of like a native gas fee that's paid for the different data transactions. And then the top 16 data DAOs actually earn a share of block rewards because they're kind of onboarding data into the network. And so similar to, I'm not sure how familiar you are with BitTensor's kind of model, they emit rewards to the top 32. I think maybe now they're up to like 46 or something subnets. yeah, the Vana protocol emits rewards to the top 16 data DAOs. And that's also kind of governable as more top data DAOs emerge.
That's fascinating. So let's say I create that DAO for my podcast, right? Can I use the Vana token as
Mhm.
as as the currency, so to speak?
Yeah, you can choose to use, the Vana native token, which is similar, just sort of like the gas token on mainnet, which isn't yet launched. That will launch later this year. You also could use like a stable coin, or you can use an ERC20 like token, depending on what you're looking for.
Hmm. You and I have a lot to talk about offline after this. But the steam engine is going here. Um, Question: why would someone want? And I know this is a question people listening and watching would have. Why would someone want to buy that AI model from Reddit? And I understand certain use cases that certain companies may create AI models to do different things, but why would they want to buy that Reddit AI model?
Yeah, so the Reddit one, I believe that the Reddit Data DAO's model is being used. Okay, it's a company that's kind of building like crypto Reddit. And what they're doing is they're allowing you to simulate, hey, if you post this comment or you post this post, how are people going to respond, right? What are people going to say? And so they're actually using the AI model to simulate that, so that before you post something, you're like, hey, this is probably how
Ah.
people are going to react to it. And so, yeah, for that particular case, that's how one of the models is used. There's another model that I think they're creating, which is predicting how many upvotes a post would get, right? And then you can kind of optimize for that. So I think there are many different applications beyond just sort of your standard chatbot. Like it's not
Yeah.
that useful to chat with just a chatbot that's good at shit
Right.
posting, right? Like I think we're on the same page there. And so sometimes it's these like industry specific niches where people are finding a lot of value for the AI model.
I would love to test it out because I want to drive more engagement. I want my
Yeah.
tweets, my posts, my whatever to drive I want to get more upvotes on Reddit, right? So that makes sense. Okay. That
Yeah,
helps.
yeah. I mean, I think too, like if you look, I don't know if you use like ChatGPT and Claude and you're like, hey, like modify this tweet or whatever, and it
Yeah.
adds hashtags and it just sounds so AI generated, right? And you're like, no, like that's not what it should be, right? So you need it trained from kind of higher quality data, right? Like actual real data, like the organic good stuff that you can get directly from people. And then you can create better AI models that can serve that purpose.
So are you working with any, let's put it this way, real world companies like the Apples or McDonald's or whoever, right, that are trying to build these models?
Yeah, so there's a Fortune 500 fashion company that we've worked with really closely, basically doing kind of like consumer insights type prediction. So their model is focused on how do you predict what's going to be in style in 3 to 6 months using like cultural data about fashion and music. And so I think those sorts of use cases are really powerful. The ones that I'm most excited about that I think are going to grow really exponentially are these new kinds of entrepreneurs. Like the guy who started the LinkedIn Data DAO, he actually just raised money for the LinkedIn Data DAO. And he used to sell data at LinkedIn and really deeply understands the value of that data set. He's selling it to sort of like Web3 native LinkedIn type competitor. And so there are all these different use cases of like, hey, what if as a business you could just like access all the data that today is stuck in these Web2 walled gardens? But there are also kind of more traditional companies like the Fortune 500 fashion company I mentioned, who are basically just trying to get data that they can't get access to otherwise and train AI models on that.
Hmm. Well, what are the laws around that, if any, or is this just a business model that you can create? Because I know that you have the data privacy stuff, but then it's going through the AI. So how do you once I guess sorry, collecting my thoughts. First, how do you secure the data that's being put into the AI model? And two, are there any laws that govern these things?
Yeah, so there are a lot of laws that govern data privacy, which generally I think are actually very strong laws. I think a lot of people don't realize just how powerful the laws are and actually how much ownership they have over their data, right? So when you use a platform, it's sort of like when you park your car in a parking lot. Like the parking lot doesn't own your car. It's still definitely your car, and they can't just like randomly take parts out of your car. Like it is yours. You get it back. You can do what you want with it. And so data regulation like GDPR and CCPA and just basically the law's view on data is that you fully own your data. When you use a platform and you check that like terms of service box, you're granting a very permissive license to them to be able to use your data for different things. They generally cannot train AI models on your de-anonymized data. They can train it on your anonymized data. So they can like, yeah, remove personal identifiers, but that ends up being kind of not as good of a data set to train on. In a Vana context, because we work with what we call non-custodial data, which is where like a user has full control over their data, they can grant whatever legal rights they would want for someone to do something to their data. You're actually able to give AI researchers access to de-anonymized data. But then you have the question of like, well, how do you ensure privacy, right? Because you want to make sure that if you're contributing data, and it's both from the perspective of like, I, as Anna, don't want my data to leak. And it's also from the perspective of with economics, like, okay, if something is public, it's really hard to charge someone money for it, right? So it's both about protecting one's privacy, but also about protecting one's economics, right? So if I in the future have like AI Anna who can kind of autonomously act on my behalf, earn revenue, et cetera, like I want to fully own that. I don't want it to just be like open source and randomly out there. Like I want the full rights to it. So that's why that kind of privacy piece is important. We have this distinction between renting data and selling data. So by default, you are just renting your data, where you're allowing an AI model to be trained in a privacy preserving way on your data, but you're never letting the data leave the system. So your data sort of stays in this secure compute environment. And that's actually one of my old professors who's been really helpful in kind of the Vana journey, invented like privacy preserving machine learning 10 years ago at MIT. And so a lot of his kind of work he was really pioneering a lot of this. But now you're able to rely on like a secure compute environment to train these models and protect the model weights so that you're protecting the economics and the privacy of the data.
It's fascinating. I feel like I can talk about this for hours, but I know we got to talk about some other stuff. You guys also got some funding. I believe Paradigm is one of your investors. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So Polychain led our initial round, and then Paradigm led our most recent round. So we've raised about $20 million to date. I think that standing up like a new network for user-owned private data is quite an undertaking. Like we've been building for years, and I think that often, yeah, you need to basically be willing to make a pretty big investment from a technical perspective in order to deliver like an end user product that's actually usable, right? Like, okay, one of our guiding goals is how do you get 100 million people to all contribute their data and train like a user-owned AI foundation model that actually beats something like GPT-6, so a future version of ChatGPT in performance. And to get 100 million people to contribute their data is like quite an undertaking. We're like a little over 1% of the way there, right? But it takes time, right? And it also takes like empowering like builders to create really good experiences that bring users on board. But yeah, we chose to work with Paradigm because honestly, they're really close to the MIT folks. Like the original MIT Bitcoin Club, I think they've invested in like 60% of our companies. And so they're just sort of like a lot of MIT overlap. And I think they really see the long-term potential of what crypto can be, right? Like they're thinking on a 10, 20-year time horizon, which I think is so important when building in this industry that just has these massive cycles that kind of go up and down. Like you really need to keep that sort of long-term view of like, hey, like what should the internet look like in 10 years? Like what should data look like in 10 years and what role will kind of Vana play in that? In order to build like a long-lasting protocol that truly shifts the way that people think about their data.
Now, quick follow-up question on that. What do you guys charge for companies and people to build these things? And on the flip side, what are you seeing people selling their AI model data for?
Yeah. So I'll give one example of like the Fortune 500 fashion company that I mentioned. So they're paying users, and so you can structure the economics however you like, right? So you can have it be like equity and a stake in an AI model, which I think in the long run is going to be the majority of how people interact. Some people choose to use more of like a stable coin payment today. So the Fortune 500 fashion company, I mean, they don't touch tokens. Like that's, like they're not about to launch a token for this. So they have, they pay people $25 for their fashion data, their Spotify data, and their demographic data. And that's pretty high, right? Like if you were just selling your Spotify data, it might be worth like 10 cents. But because you're combining the data from across different sources, they're able to use that for forecasting of like, hey, based on the music you listen to, what's going to be in style in like 3 to 6 months. And that's super, super powerful. So that's kind of one example from just like a pure data, sales view. In terms of Vana's economics, so we charge a small, like the protocol charges a small data transaction fee. It's like less than a cent on testnet right now. It's similar to Ethereum, where basically as volume goes up, like fees come up, but we've architected it to try to keep fees really as low as possible. And then by default, Vana is the currency for data sales, right? So if you are actually buying data if you're buying $250,000, $1 million of data on the platform, you are buying the Vana native token and then distributing that to the particular data DAO that you want to offer data to, whether that's in the form of buying their token, burning it. And the reason why there are all these different tokens in the system is that you really need quite flexible economics to work with data, right? Like if I were to ask you like, hey, how much is your Amazon purchase data worth relative to your Spotify data? Like that's possibly an unsolvable math question, right? Like, and so we've basically pushed it to, hey, you have these data set specific tokens, which allow for both data DAOs and flexible economics, right? Of like, hey, each data DAO can choose how much they want to charge for their data, how much they want to, what they would say yes to, what they would say no to. And so you get a lot of that flexibility.
I know, and I apologize. I'm thinking a lot about the things you're saying and how I can leverage it. So I
Yeah,
guess I'm thinking about let's say I set up that model. I can pay my viewers and listeners to contribute to the data set, and they can also be stakeholders. So the revenue that comes in when we sell or lend the model out, whatever it is, they get a cut of the revenue.
exactly. Yeah.
And how are the payments? Is it done automatically, like if you use stable coins?
Yeah. It's sort of all in smart contracts. So anything you can express in Solidity. We've seen some people use Viper, which is just like the Python way to write smart contracts, because some of them are more like AI people. And so, anything you can express in Solidity, you can kind of use to distribute payments and kind of reward the contributors who kind of put their knowledge towards making the AI model more capable. And something I'll mention too is one important concept within Vana is proof of contribution, which is basically measuring, hey, for a given piece of knowledge or data that comes in to help an AI model, how much is it actually helping, right? And so you can basically measure, hey, how much new information, new knowledge is contained in this data point, and then reward them proportionally to that. And that is implemented at the data set and AI model level. So there's a different one for Reddit, for LinkedIn, for your AI model. I think also the best way to understand a system is, to think about how you would fit into it. So I think these are great questions to be asking.
And what does the interface look like for people to submit that data? Is it like a GUI interface app? What does that look like?
Yeah, so Vana as a network is like it's a peer-to-peer protocol similar to Ethereum, right? So you can interface with the network through like a command line terminal. That's like the raw way to interface with it. Most people don't do that, right? Most people use like an interface, so you can add it to MetaMask, and then you can basically see your kind of like data financial profile in MetaMask. And then there are a couple different UIs that people have built out. So like the Reddit Data DAO, they built their own UI, so you can contribute your Reddit data. There's another project that has this automatic data scraper where they sort of go and get your data automatically for you. And then they're working on kind of adding a way so that you can contribute that back to the Vana network. So yeah, you can use like a it just looks like a website, like an app, which is sort of like traditional DApp. Or you can kind of like open things up and get into it if you want to touch the code. But yeah, the core network is a peer-to-peer network. So there are lots of different UIs on top of it.
Interesting. What's on your 2024 roadmap or the remainder of 2024?
Yeah, so a lot of our focus right now is really supporting the data DAOs that are kind of being built on Vana and then getting ready for mainnet launch. And so kind of going through the audit process, going through kind of like load testing and all sorts of other kind of like preparations from that front. And then, yeah, so mainnet will be stood up by a set of independent validators who are all kind of like choosing to run the Vana network from scratch. So stewarding that launch process, it is, yeah, it sort of basically standing up a new blockchain from scratch and supporting these like Data DAO applications on top of it.
Mm. Um, well, you and I are going to talk offline about what I want to do, but I want to get your take on, with the limited time we have, on the rest of the crypto market. Obviously, you started out in blockchain and crypto, yeah, working at Cello. What are your thoughts on how the market has matured? We got ETFs now. Crypto regulations seemed like they're on the cusp of getting passed. You got politicians, supporting crypto. What are your thoughts on the growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that broadly we've seen this shift where Bitcoin is pretty much like mainstream accepted as like a store of value, right? And if we look back 9 or 10 years, like that's kind of crazy that people are now just accepting like, yeah, it's Bitcoin. Like it's like a reasonable store of value that has like predictable kind of like inflation and other properties people value in terms of like, yeah, having a store of value. So I think that that is an incredible shift. It's really easy to forget, right? When you go through these kind of like bull and bear cycles, you're like, oh, like Bitcoin is, but it's like, okay, like if we look over a long time horizon, like this is doing amazing. I think it's also led to some really cool shifts around how people think about kind of like true ownership and control. I think crypto has yet to deliver on this promise of like owning your data, right? That is like, I think the promise that actually got a lot of people into crypto super early on, but we're not there yet. Like Vana is working to make sure that we get there over a several year time horizon. But I think we're getting closer and closer to mainstream adoption. I think that there are a lot of kind of emergent use cases that we're seeing related to, yeah, kind of moving beyond just like stable coins or like stable means of payment, which are more like decentralized applications, right? Like I think Farcaster is an example of like they're basically using sovereignty. Like that's the core proposition they have. It's not financial. And I think those are quite cool. So yeah, generally super optimistic. Like we're still so early in building so much of this out. And I think another good sort of, yeah, something I like to track is just like where are smart people spending their time. And I think a lot of my like smart friends are spending time in decentralized AI. And that makes me think like, okay, there's a lot of growth here. There's a lot of talent basically going towards solving some of these key problems. And so that's another kind of internal metric I track. And there's some cool stuff happening in like DeFi as well. I think more smart people are starting to spend time there figuring out, yeah, some of the decentralized science questions.
Do you think AI can help DeFi to be more secure and we avoid some of these exploits and things we've had over the years? And I know version 1.0 of anything is going to have flaws, right?
Mhm.
But I haven't really touched a lot of DeFi because of all these hacks and all these exploits. But do you think AI could help solve some of those problems?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot like if you think about AI as almost giving you knowledge on demand, there are so many different ways you can use that, right? Like having knowledge on demand to like do engineering work or do code auditing work. It seems plausible to say, yes, that could help reduce exploits. Like I would say I haven't spent enough time thinking about it because there are a couple different variables, right? You also could have more bad actors on the AI side that
Yeah.
so I like would have to kind of like reason through that a little bit more, and I haven't thought about it in depth. But yeah, generally when you have like knowledge on demand, like it really changes the economics of a system and kind of what's possible, where value accrues. We think it accrues in data, and how markets play out.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're saying now, I'm thinking of AI wars, AI models fighting each other, one's trying to police, one trying to attack and, hack things. So,
Yeah, it's a crazy world out there, Like I think a lot of that's already going on, and we don't even, yeah, we might not even realize it. But yeah, I want like an AI Anna agent who kind of like defends my interests and
yeah,
make sure that all is well.
for sure. Anna, I know I kept you a bit over time, so I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Oh, I see myself as kind of already living in this like digital world primarily, so it's themed around data sovereignty and data ownership and kind of like some research related topics. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I figured it was going to be like something related to what you're already doing.
Yeah.
Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Probably green tea. I guess that's a drink, but it's just consistent. Yeah.
Favorite musician or band?
I actually didn't start listening to music until a few years ago, so I um probably like a major laser workout playlist that I just work out to. Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Let's see. You know, I actually I only watch movies on airplanes, so I'm actually a huge fan of Mr. Beast. I think he's a really interesting entrepreneur. So he's in the video category. I would say like Mr. Beast and sort of the arc that he's pulled off from a an attention perspective. Yeah.
And favorite book?
Favorite book. Actually, I love reading. I think David Sedaris is this amazing writer. He's like a humor comedy type writer, but he's a really good storyteller, and he has this like arc of stories that always like comes back in just the right way. And so, yeah, he's like one of my favorite writers.
When you're not working at Vana, what are you doing for fun?
Probably like biking or skiing. Maybe like I don't get to write that much code anymore in the Vana context, and so I still try to just like explore, especially some of the new AI stuff. When I have some time on the weekends.
And a pleasure chatting with you. I'm really, really fascinated and excited for the work Vana is doing. And we're going to talk more, but thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for the questions.